Welcome to another episode of So You Think You Can Doc. My name's Allan Jhagroo, nephrologist and host. Today we have a guest with us, and we have some new digs, a new environment that we're going to be in. So we'll see how this works out, and we'll move forward. But this is my co-host.
Hey, I'm Ali, and a urologist.
And we have
one of the nephrology fellows here at UW.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of walk through Sundeep's life a little bit, and we're going to be using, this is Ali's office.
Yeah.
So if you see anything that's questionable here, we're going to blame him.
I think that's the thing about my office. Everything is questionable. And my wife said this about me. She said, I always do things and I wear things that make people ask questions. And it's because I'm hoping that they will. And if they don't, I'm just like, all right, cool. Then I guess this is all right. Like, I don't have to feel bad about being as much of a nerd as I am. So thank you for coming to my space. It's our space now. It accommodates all of us. Feel free to ask any questions about anything else, but otherwise, I think we've got a ton of questions for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right? So,
yeah, and it's a discussion, right? So there's going to be things about us, but you're the new person here that we wanna learn about. Anyway, so we're gonna kind of get into your life, but we always kind of start off with where'd you grow up, and as far as location and anything interesting at that part of your life.
Yeah, so I was born in Chicago. My dad is a pediatrician, so he did his training at Creighton University in Omaha, but then he did a fellowship 1 year in Chicago, where I was born. After that fellowship, ended up going back to Omaha, and then stayed there for like a year or so. I was born, 79, and so in 81, he moved to Erie, Pennsylvania. Has been there ever since, and that's where I grew up.
Erie, Pennsylvania.
So Northwest PA, right on the link.
It's one of those places that everybody's heard of, but nobody actually knows anything about.
Exactly.
It's like Erie. Was it in a movie or something?
There was a movie about Erie. It was actually a music group that came out of there. I don't remember offhand. Yeah, there's a lot of people that come out of Erie. So, like the War of 1812 was the northern. They say that war was won in Louisiana and New Orleans. Actually, the Battle of New Orleans, but the Northern Front was actually won because of Erie. We have the USS Brig Niagara. So the ship is still there, like it's in the bay, but that was used to defeat the British at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's where you see that "Don't give up the ship." You ever see that moniker on the flag? So it comes from that.
Yeah, excuse my ignorance here, but so there's a ship. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm picturing Pennsylvania as like landlocked. Right?
it's on the lake, right? Erie.
Yeah,
Erie,
it's
the lake.
It's the only lake. Yeah, it's the only lake. Northwest PA is the only lake front you have on there.
All right.
And then Philadelphia, you'll have the river, right?
Okay.
How are they fighting the British in the lake? I guess maybe this is my ignorance, right?
Yeah.
How did the British?
That's what I'm picturing here. I'm just like.
But I guess there is a tributary.
Because you have to take the what is it, the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah.
Then goes to Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
To Lake Erie, and they had they have forts in Canada, and then along the lake, basically all the Great Lakes throughout here. So that's In fact, there's I think only 2 statues in the world of George Washington in a British uniform.
No
and
way.
one of them it's in Waterford, which is just south of Erie.
Why are you in a British uniform?
Because he used to be part of the British military.
I should know these things, right?
You have to watch Hamilton.
I wanted to watch it so bad.
I just saw it.
You did? Did you see it on the last?
For the 3rd time.
My God, man. So that's the thing is I was trying to convince my wife to come with me, but it's like so hard now with kids. When do we go? How are we going to go? But George Washington's a central figure in that story. Whenever it comes to founding fathers, I tend to focus on Thomas Jefferson just because I interviewed at Charlottesville for a job, and so I did a deep dive at that time. But I never really did take the time to think. It's one of these things about all these figures that there's always this angle to them that you had never really thought about, and then you're just like, wait a minute. George Washington, I guess all of these founding fathers were British first, right?
Yeah.
So that puts a whole new light on things. But we didn't get to make it to watch Hamilton. But back to Erie and how George. But I think every town has their little historical. I remember when my brother was in Dallas, he really wanted to show me where JFK got shot. And I'm just like, that's really morbid. But it's still, every town has that little historical thing. Yeah. So, but the entire time in Lake Erie, not Lake Erie, in Erie, you always knew you wanted to be a doctor.
Well, I actually want to be an astronaut.
Heck yeah, man.
And I'm really into space. But the problem is you cannot fly first of all, you can't fly the space shuttle, but you can't fly any of the NASA test planes unless you have natural 20/20 vision.
Oh.
And so, obviously you don't want, you have a $50 million machine and your contact goes out. They're not going to do that. Exactly.
I should tell you about the time I was doing urology and then my contacts fell out. And I was operating with the chair, and he's just like, no. And I was just like, oh, God, don't tell him, just finish. But you can do it. That's the thing, we operate in 2 dimensions. But
I had,
what changed?
When I was I did my undergrad at Penn State, and I was in pre-med initially, and the counselors there, the guidance counselors, I actually told them that, like, yeah, I wanted to be an astronaut. And I told them at the interview that if there was a way I could become an astronaut, I would quit pre-med.
Right away.
Right there, yeah.
You know,
and you
you
could tell with their face when they said that, like, we don't want this back.
Like right now, I know LASIK isn't invented yet, but have you heard of it?
Yeah. So that's why then I was like, oh, well, it kind of was, I wanted to do ophthalmology because, like, well, I can't do what I wanted to do. I would want to help people who have eye problems so they could do whatever they wanted to do. And then there was actually an interesting thing that there was a National Geographic, documentary or whatever. Lisa Ling used to do episodes for them. And she did one where she followed these ophthalmologists. And I don't know if they went to Nepal or India or whatever, but these ophthalmologists were carrying their machines, cataract machines. And they would carry like up the trail, and you would see they would do cataract surgery, like these remote villages, right? Because they know access to ophthalmology. And I remember these women were all sitting like on the cot. Like, so what they do is they did the cataract surgery and they're bandaged. And so then whatever, like 1 or 2 or 3 days later, whenever it was, they're all sitting on a cot and then like outside, and they tell the women to remove the bandages, and they're like all crying because they can see. Right? Yeah. I was like, I would love to do that. Yeah. Because in medicine, like my father's a pediatrician. When we go to India, he always does, like, in the village that he's at, he always does, medicine. And there's a line out from the house, people seeing him. Well, when you're a kid, like, oh, hey, antibiotic or this, and the kid's better. Great. But when you're in a internal medicine or family medicine, what can we do that really changes rural medicine? Here's some blood pressure pills, but then when you run out, when we leave, the blood pressure goes back up. And you can't really do anything, right?
And I think that's one of the underlying structures in medicine that we're getting off the path of talking. We're going to talk about big problems. But like this idea of teaching somebody how to fish versus giving them a fish thing, right? And like so much of medicine, I think one of the biggest struggles for me in medical school was the slow realization that, like, wait a minute, is everything we do, like, as soon as we give them the fish, they eat the fish and then it's gone? And like where's the actual, like, long-term fix? So how do you wrestle with that idea?
Yeah, well, that's part of the reason why I like going into transplants.
I'm still stuck on astronaut.
Yeah, but the ophthalmology thing, that's what I'm saying, is you get that, and then basically I was told, like, your board scores are not going to qualify you for ophthalmology. So then I wanted to do dermatology. I suffer from eczema, and I've, like, avoided social situations before. I'm like, well, like, you can fix, people will do stuff to make sure their skin is good.
Yeah.
Right? They'll take the effort. People don't take their effort to make sure their diabetes is good, right?
Right.
Until it's too late.
Right. It's the cosmetic thing. Yeah. It's like I had to teach high school students about drugs and smoking or whatever. And you talk about lung cancer, they don't care. Teeth are yellow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
exactly.
that was
Instagram pictures.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was the angle. Yeah. I do want to pull you still back, really back to not truly back to the astronaut era, but because you kind of went into, undergrad and then into like medical school stuff. So you're going into undergrad here, and at this point, the eyesight's already brought up?
Yeah, so at that point, I was like, I only applied to like 3 undergrad schools, and Penn State, which was just like 3.5 hours away. It's not a state school; it's actually a private school, even though it says Penn State. But at that point, I wanted to be a doctor to be an ophthalmologist. So they actually had a major pre-med, which is what I enrolled into, immediately when I...
But before going into that, were you really gearing yourself up with, I guess, whatever astronaut sciences?
Yeah, no,
I was
physics, I was accepted to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical School in Daytona.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So but because so they said, and basically what they said was, you won't be able to fly the test plane or be a test pilot and fly the space shuttle and be an astronaut. There's other things in aeronautical field that you can do. And I'm like, well, that's a tease that I'm sitting in the control tower. People, I'm sitting twiddling my thumb.
Tell me about space.
So I'm like, I'm not going to Embry-Riddle. I choose the path. I'm going to become a doctor.
But you had, I guess, you had your dad, right? So you had some exposure and some influence and some insight, I guess, into like what it means. And it sounds like you had a clue as to what it means beyond just, I guess, in a structured way in the United States. You had, someone who's gone outside and you could see those, I guess, broad scopes. And part of why I say that is because we get into our specializations and what you do and this, that, and the other. And you're pretty well protected here, right? Like, especially in a big university system where, you have people who specialize in right thumbs and left thumbs,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when your dad's out there, he's it, like, for everything, right? And my father's the same way. He's a pulmonologist that does everything you shouldn't be doing, right? But they did all of those things. So you had all those exposures. And were you thinking like, hey, I kind of want to be like, but it sounds like you had some angles of thought. Were you thinking like, I want to do everything, the classic sense of, because most of us were thinking like, hey, I want to be a doctor. You don't think of like, I only do this.
No,
right?
It's a great question. And I'll say this, that there's two things that my father told me. So he's pediatrician, but the reason he became a pediatrician was in India, specialists are considered dumb.
Oh.
So if you're internal medicine pediatrics, like you said, you know everything. Mm-hmm. So you're a urologist or a nephrologist, you're considered dumb.
Because you only know one thing.
Exactly.
Right?
So when he came into the country, he actually originally did his internship in Erie, and they had an orthopedic residency. And they wanted him. Yeah. But he's like, no way I'm going to do orthopedics. I'm going to do pediatrics. One of the things he says is that if he could do it all over again, he would have went into orthopedics.
Yeah.
And so when I was like becoming a doctor, he basically said, hey, very frank, procedures make money in medicine. Right? Because pediatrics, you're basically the low end of the totem pole when it comes to money.
Yeah.
Unfortunate truth.
Yeah.
All right. So, you're kind of in this mode. All right. We've accepted the astronaut thing's not going to fly. I had to say it. Couldn't help it.
My dad joke instincts.
Yeah. Then now we're going along the lines of the medical field, and you've got a pre-med major, so it sounds like you don't really have to full commit to anything because it's pretty directed, I guess. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, you take the risk because you're a pre-med major. So at Penn State, they have pre-med, and then they have a general science major. And they have like this, I was in the life science option. The difference is in pre-med, you have to take calc-based physics. General science, you have to take algebra-based physics. So I didn't do too well in calc-based physics. So my mentor was like, you should just switch over to general science. And that way you do algebra-based physics. But here's the thing is that you're in a pre-med or general science. If you don't go into medical school, what do? It's not like you're a physical chemistry major.
Yeah, you don't have a biology
or OChem major or biology, exactly, where you can branch out. So like you have basically now locked in. If you don't do it, like what are you going to do?
Then you're just
the motivation is there, exactly.
Yeah. So what did that feel like?
There was pressure. There's no doubt.
So you're there with all these other pre-med majors, I assume, right? and they're all like, this is Penn State. This is to start with, and now they're all gunners. I assume, right?
Yeah. That's the thing they don't tell you in high school, right? I was ranked, I think, like at the end of when we started freshman year in high school, I think we had 604 students in my class. And I'm being like, I think 550 or 580. I was 32, right? So, but the thing is, what they don't tell you is when you go to college, the rest of the people in your class were also in the top 10%, right? So you're not top 10%, you're average or below average. So that's a shock, that's a huge shock.
And I think that's one of the things about discussing transitions and period. I just watched this show called Adolescence, which if you have watched it, we can talk about it later.
Heard about it.
Yeah. It's very interesting. But this idea of transitioning, because adolescence is this transition from childhood into adulthood. But the change in perspective, you're kind of going through this tunnel and you're coming out the other side. And it's a whole new way of, perceiving your life. So then you look back on what you were worried about before and you're like, I can't believe I was worried about that. And every time you get worried, you're like, there's no way I can be more worried than I am now.
Yeah.
And then you go through the tunnel again, you're just like, how am I more worried than I was worried back then? Right? 100%. But this is one of those first, ramp ups, right? What would you say are the biggest challenges you felt? And how do you think you kind of steadied yourself through those waters? Or do you think you kind of just powered through it?
I think I just powered through it. But I think one of the things that if I could do it all over again, I probably would have went to, instead of Penn State main campus, I would have went to the branch campus. The reason why is something I didn't realize is that I don't do well on multiple choice tests. I can do really good on oral tests, fill in the blank paragraph essay. Well, when you're at a big, large university, everything is multiple choice. So, in fact, only one semester did I ever make the dean's list. And that semester, all my classes, except for one, I got an A in, and they were all non-multiple choice exams. The one that I got a B was the class that had a multiple choice. So it was frustrating through college because I'm like, I know this, but my grades are this. Yeah. And so, you try to use, like, in retrospect, I would say do the test questions, but you don't know that. Like, you say, I have to read this thing 5 times to get it in my brain.
It's an interesting thing, the whole, like, because an open-ended, you can put out what you know. But then these multiple choices, all these games that are now being played, and which one is the most, which one is this. Like, so, I have a teenager and a first-year college student, as kids, so I think about these things, and we're looking at, like, law school, just the LSAT, right? That's the big thing. Do you know what major scores the best on that? Philosophy.
LSAT.
Really? The philosophy?
Really? They have the highest scores.
This whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like because they're taught how to outthink this test, not necessarily knowledge, right? Yeah. It's interesting.
It's the game, like the game, the inside game.
Yeah, because my son is like really into those kinds of things. Actually, I threw some questions at him last night and he got them all right. Which he's in high school. So these are LSAT questions, right? Because they were all like puzzle and, how do you do this, and the other, whatever it is. And he likes that kind of stuff, right? But he likes, I think, philosophy, which we'll see how that goes.
I'm excited.
But it's interesting, right? So there's this whole thing about the standardized exams and, where it kind of pigeonholes you into, and you're realizing, and there's also size of school, right? There's a lot of, I think Malcolm Gladwell talks a lot about that stuff, where he talks about like the perfect size and the right size pond, blah, 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 for where you thrive. Penn State's a zoo, right? It's a massive, school where you could easily get lost, right? And now you're feeling the, what probably came easy to you in high school, being in that top 10% is now a chore. God only knows why you need calculus-based physics in medicine. It's obviously a weed out thing, right? It's just like, let's make it really hard. Like, I was a chemistry major, so I had to do like physical chemistry it was just ridiculous. I think the average score in most of the exams was like, you're passing, which is kind of scary, right? So like your calculus-based physics, you're going to be a what? And you only got 50% of it right? Anyway, that's another story.
I remember hearing about this class. I never had to take physical chemistry. What is that?
Yeah, I mean...
I never took PChem, but I know there was a PChem major. But we had to take organic chemistry, OChem.
Yeah, that was... I think that was the first time in my life that I walked into a test, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I just don't think I know any of these ones. And I walked out.
And there was, like, biochemistry had, like, PChem, like the one semester. But then if you were a chemistry major, you had 2 semesters of this heavy PChem, calculus-based, blah, blah, blah. I remember for intimidation purposes, I used to walk into exams with an abacus. Hopeless. They were flicking the abacus, right? Because we weren't allowed calculators back then either, right? So it was kind of funny. Like, bring in the abacus and teacher was like, I don't know how to use it. Somebody had given it to me. It was brass. It was like nice. I can't remember if my father gave it. It was something like, it looked impressive to me. Yeah. All right. So there we are, right? You're suffering through some classes. You obviously don't want to be in some of them, but, this is the route that you chose and, you're going with it. Did you have doubts?
Yeah. And I have to say there's more to it because my father, when he was in India, like they lived in the village. So I know in the 80s on the farm, I remember seeing like the women would go a mile or whatever, get the water, like, put it on their head, walk back. Yeah. And like, when we would visit in the summertime, blackouts all the time. So this is how he lived. And he went, your worship may not know, but he went to AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So it's considered like the top 5 in the world to train. They make people come out of there and make people like from Harvard look like they're in preschool. And so this is a guy who comes out of a village. They only accept 50 to 60 people. Out of the 50 to 60 people, a few of them are reserved for like politicians' kids. So he goes in, and then he comes to America. And here I'm living where we lived. I lived in a private drive, 2.5 acre lot, 3,500 square foot house. And so now I'm like struggling, trying to be a doctor where you have to beat this. And then you already have someone who's this saying like, why can't you do the multiple choice exam? The answer's in front of you.
My dad always said that. It's one of these things because my dad, I think something about like there's a hardiness to immigrant fathers and things like that, that the ones that made it, like who has that kind of, but that's the line he used on my oldest brother. And boy, it was never helpful.
Like O-Chem or P-Chem calculus. And this guy, like, you know, it's one of the things you have to like, yeah, you got to push through. I mean,
but this is part of I think it's part of the crisis that this generation is also facing, right? Because they have, you know, maybe not you as much, but the people like us who are, now they're like, wow, we have to live up to, we have to accomplish this, that, and the other. And, you know, this is a generation where we're really pushing, and they are too, their quality of life and happiness rather than what you achieve that you can put on your title, you know, and especially with the cost of education, you know, at this time, it's no longer just like, hey, even if you could, you should, which is kind of where I was, right? It was like, oh, if you could, then you should, because like, then why wouldn't you want to be a doctor or just, and now it's like, well, you'll have $1,000 of loans. Well, there's a good reason not to be. And, you know, people wouldn't blink at saying like, oh yeah, I completely get why you didn't do that. You know, so I think there's a shift, there's a change there, and it's not what it was or sought after the way it was. So, you know, you've had your doubts, sounds like.
Yeah. And then, I had a choice. At that time, we're in Erie. There's a Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. And so, but I didn't want to move back. I got accepted after during college, but then I didn't want to move home, and I didn't get it. I interviewed at a bunch of MD places, but I didn't get in. So I spent a year at MCP Hahnemann in Philadelphia, which is now Drexel College of Medicine, and I did a postgraduate there for a year. And so they had a program that it was like a 2 years master's class, but after the first year, you took 75% of the medical school classes. So they just teleconferenced it to the Center City, which is inside Philly, from their campus, the medical school campus. And whatever the average, so at MCP Hahnemann, like they don't give out letter grades. It's pass, fail, high honors, right? But in ours, what they did is whatever the average was for the medical school would be the B in our program. So you were guaranteed an interview to MCP Hahnemann Medical School if you were just part of that program. But they basically said, like, if you can get all A's, then you basically will get a spot.
How is nobody ever like making the Squid Games comment?
Yeah.
Right. Like the more I think about this, because there was this very similar program where I was at the University of South Florida, and my buddy did it, Sean Patel did it. And there was a whole compadre of people that were taking it, and it was basically every single one of those screens, and it was just them knocking on the door again. Like, but that's the thing is that like it's amazing to keep that path going, because people who want to go, and it's that fire that sort of makes, the hardest steel. But then it's just like, how much is this fire? What is it actually burning, right? And like, what's its fuel? And how do you keep burning that fire, ignoring that type of narrative to still focus on what you need to accomplish?
And it's discouraging because like, we just talked about multiple choice. There's an art. It's not what you know. It's how you take the exam. You have to know how to take the exam. And I didn't know this till after the fact, but when I lived in Philadelphia, I actually lived in the suburbs, so I took the regional rail in. Well, most of the people in the class lived like within a few blocks, so they would study in the library there. Well, the library had a binder of questions, which were very similar to the test questions. So these people who you knew wouldn't get in were getting A's. Here, I'm not getting, And then 9/11 happened.
I saw that all through, through undergrad. There were people who didn't go to class. They didn't do anything else other than sit there, and they had test banks from prior whatever, this, that, and the other, and we just studied. They didn't even know. They just knew this one is a C, this one is B, and they just would keep doing the questions over and over and over and over, and then they would do great on tests.
Yeah, but then I get to wondering, it's one of these things. There's a really good book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes by Mortimer Adler. In the introduction, he talks about speaking of your abacus, I think your abacus does the same kind of thing. Every bead on a lower level is worth infinitely more than the bead above, right? Not infinitely, but just in a compound factor, right? So these small mistakes, okay, like these guys that say that, okay, I'm just gonna memorize these questions, I'm gonna take the test, I'm gonna get a really good grade. Okay, but now they get to the next level, the transition, and now there's like actual people's lives on the line. And this guy is like, wait a minute, there was no binder of questions for this person's X and X. I mean, I don't want to start naming medical conditions. I only do one thing now. I made the orthopedics choice. Right. But it's a small mistake that in the beginning they're just like, yeah, there's no consequences to this. But I worry about, like, you know, in a day and age, I have a lot of my good friends, Sean Patel now, he's in his internal medicine residency in Brandon. I have a lot of hospitalist internal medicine friends that what their biggest complaint is like the hospitalist who isn't thinking. Right. And this eternal battle of like, well, no, you don't even know what you're talking about kind of thing. And how much of that comes from a bunch of people who are just memorizing binder answers now having to make real thinking problems. Right. Because they mastered multiple choice, but they couldn't, you know, answer an oral board question scenario to save their lives. Right. And
I think this is a perfect. So I was an EMT at Penn State. When I was doing this 1-year post-grad, we were allowed to volunteer. There's a park called Love Park where you check the blood pressure and heart rate of the homeless people. And so our program and the medical school would volunteer. And I would go there and the students didn't know how to take a blood pressure or heart rate. Here I am thinking, they got into medical school. I'm trying to get into medical school. I know like what I'm doing because I was an EMT. But you said like, wait, they could do the test. They answered the question. They did what they had to do to get in.
Were high enough.
Exactly.
You want to know the truth? This is going to get really embarrassing. We're going to get back to talking about your career. My wife's sister, she's doing her CNA class now, and they were talking about blood pressure. And my wife was joking. It was like, do you know I actually use a stethoscope to get it? And she goes, no, I have no idea. She says, yeah, all of us use the digital button. And then I started thinking about it. And I tried to explain it to her, and then I realized I've completely forgotten that skill. It's completely, in that moment, I was just like, I actually don't know how to explain this to you. I just know that it's done. Right? And it's one of these things about like, but then the second that Marissa started explaining it, then I started getting it. Right? But it's just like one of the other things that follows me into a space like this, and part of the reason why I feel like I have to do this is because otherwise it feels like the imposter syndrome starts to really crawl in a second. Right? And I think that's one of the things about there's a reality, a tangible reality to accomplishment outside of, oh, I got an acceptance letter. Oh, I got this. It's, are you still helping the ladies who removed the bandage and now they can see? Right? And that's, I think, what ultimately underlies all of this. And that's why I love having these conversations, because it just gives me a whole other perspective on all these kinds of things.
But, and I think there's going to be a bit of an evolution to this whole selection process, right? Like selecting the, you know, the best test takers, the smart grades. What I get it. There's a limited resources, that and the other, but you know, we all know this whole AI wave is going to come to some degree, and it's going to hit some banks and it's going to bounce off of others. But the concept of figuring out the diagnosis and, you know, medication interactions, that's clearly going to get taken over primarily with AI as a supporter. So what are our roles really going to be? Obviously, if you're doing procedures, there's a physical part of things, but beyond that, there's going to be this communication thing, right? Like where you're talking to patients, explaining it to them and getting them to understand in a way that they trust you, right? I think it's going to be a far leap for trust to be built, especially in the populations that we're going to be treating primarily.
And I think one of the things, people a lot smarter than me have probably had a lot more smart things to say about this, but the idea of the factors that erode the physician-patient trust. You know, I was taught motivational interviewing when I was in medical school, and that was completely about building the trust, right? And it was us trying to get away from that, you know, paternalistic model and start getting patients to be involved. But how are we going to want patients to be involved in making these kinds of decisions with us if they don't even trust us, right? And AI, what's the effect that AI is going to have on that relationship? Yeah. You know, are they going to start looking at us like the Starbucks drive-through?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very small off-topic, you know, example, because that's what we're full of. But you know, we're in Wisconsin. The feels like this morning was 41 degrees. Yeah. Okay. And we saw a patient earlier today, and my quick mention of my 105-pound dog's feet freezing and me carrying them back inside, I was also reading that guy's reaction, and he of course has a lab as well too, right? And in the end of it, if we're talking about doing a procedure like a biopsy, that by itself, he's going to listen to me, right?
You can establish rapport.
Now, how does AI function in that world, right? Because I just went completely bat-angled every direction, right? Yeah. But, you know, and I knew when I walk out, you recognize that, and you knew that too, that like, yeah, because that's where we might have to go with this. And not that I really went in there like, oh, let me tell him about the dog. So like, no, that was literally my morning. We were looking at the weather on his TV, and that was just the conversation. But those are the things that are going to really empower us, I think, going forward.
Maybe I need a little more background. Did he end up needing Were we not supposed to talk about it? Did they need a procedure or something? Or
It was literally today. Like, we don't know.
No.
I don't know where this is going yet.
Right.
I don't even know if the dog thing is useful. It was like, but it was that, relation, and it wasn't like, it's not like we spent forever in there. It was just enough.
For a little moment of genuine human connection.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't know if it's useful or not. I don't know if it's going to be necessary, but why not? It doesn't take much to give it.
It's definitely, it's something that AI can't do.
So
Right.
we are going to get back to AI, I guess, even walking through your career.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a substitute; it's an adjunct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, that's kind of the bottom line, right? Until something else changes, I guess we'll see. I can't get over those robots loading dishwashers. Anyway, all right, we'll leave that alone a little bit.
I mean, I'm the robot loading the dishwasher at home. So if you have more insight into my philosophical debate with myself as I load the dishwasher, I'm all ears.
Yeah, do it while your thumb's broken. That's my suggestion.
But so the fire. So there's gunners. You're in Philadelphia now in this program where if you get a high enough grade, you get a guaranteed interview. Right?
Well, no. If you're in the program, you get a guaranteed interview. If you get a high enough grade, unwritten rule, you'll get it. You'll get a
medical
spot.
school. So it's like that summer term before starting undergrad. Like just like get you a little bit ahead of the game. Like, oh, he's really got it. He's not going to drop out. I always wondered if those types of programs were made to like bolster passing rates and stuff like that.
I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, if you it's like I did a chemistry degree, but in all fairness, I went to a specialized high school where I did 2 to 3 hours a day of chemistry for the last 2 years. So when I was in undergrad, it was a joke, and I was just tutoring other people, right? Like it was extremely easy for me to do that, right? But the same concept, if you've done it already, right, then you can focus on, I guess, higher level questions rather than the basics, right? Well, everybody else is just like getting the basics, trying to figure out how to check a blood pressure. You're already, you already know how to do that. So you're there, and how is this going?
It's not going well. It was going okay, but when I went there, it was 2001.
Yeah.
So 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And like at that time, there was some thought that Philly was going to get hit, like when that happened. But we had an exam the next day. They never canceled it.
There's a national disaster, and it's like, hey, you still have to go to your medical school exam.
And so, but remember, I told you I had to take the regional rail in. So you can imagine they see somebody of my skin color, and you could just cut like the air with a knife because they see like, oh,
and you're like, I really need to get through. Nothing you can do.
So I go take the test, bomb it. Everybody bombed it. Actually, the program director says, I don't know, it was like
probably
a week later.
Canceled the test.
No, that's not what you would think he would have said that. But he said like there was like a meeting a week later or something. He said that I still remember this. He said, if you guys were affected, you should have told me and you wouldn't have to take the test. And exactly, right? What do you mean if you were affected? What are you talking about?
This is like the whole residency hours.
Like I bombed, and then like after that, it just was like, but I ended up reapplying to, at that time, so I worked when I was in undergrad, but my parents paid the tuition basically. So, but this was the first year I was taking med school or student loans. And so then I was like, hey, let me reapply to Locum because then I can live with my parents. And so that's what I ended up doing. They did accept me for that, even though like I didn't do too hot in the post-grad. But part of it, I think, had to do because my father was on faculty as he accepted students for the pediatrics rotation. So I think that, but when I like went in there, and then people would tell me their MCAT scores, and they were like really low. So I was like, okay, maybe I don't know how much he really had, right? But I still took medical student loans for when I went to Locum. But like I lived with my parents, that part of the cost was defrayed. But yeah, I mean, but it was all of a sudden now you start. When I was at that post grad, like now you start sweating because you've got a general science degree. You didn't do well in the post grad. Like, what job am I? Going to do if I don't get accepted to med school? What do I do from here?
Yeah, that's one of the banked up work. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, you're right. In the motivation, well, even the loans part is that, well, I gotta finish now, right? Like that's part of the concept.
And one of the higher ups at that program, the postgrad program, actually told me, he said, maybe being a doctor isn't what you should be doing.
That's a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a real hard thing to hear, right?
So what in you at that point, other than, the commit from the major or this, that, and the other, I guess, what helped you see yourself as like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a good doctor. I'm going to enjoy being a doctor. While you're getting that kind of feedback?
Well, I just was like, fear of failure. And so when you have that fear of failure, then it was like, well, you got to keep working at it. And then throughout that time, like I like reading inspirational stories about books. Yeah. And you read, like, there's not one, whether they're famous or not famous, not one successful person that has not failed.
Yeah.
In one way or the other, right? Dave Thomas from Wendy's took him forever. Nobody believed in what he was doing before. Colonel Sanders went to Dave Thomas and said, hey, I have this, I want to do fried chicken. Nobody bought into it, right? Yeah. And then he started his own, but he failed a lot of times. Peanut butter cups, right? Yeah. He marketed to Hershey. The guy who, I forget who it was, he marketed to Hershey. And they're like, this is the dumbest idea. It's one of the best selling.
What are you trying to do to my chocolate?
Hershey's got it. And then, like, the rest is history. It's one of the best selling chocolates that Hershey's has.
There's what I'm identifying here is this trait, this element of self-belief that, like, no, I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's one of the things about the fire from these tests that it's like, it really allows that part of you to really rise. And
I think you can see that there is a path to get there. If I were to, like, make a parallel path, American Idol, right? If, Simon Cowell, if you can't sing, like, it doesn't matter how much you believe that you can sing. If you can't sing, it's over. Yeah, like, you're not going to go anywhere. Like, I wasn't in that position where I needed that trigger. Or if I'm not 6'2", can't play basketball. Right? I knew, like, if I could just use my brain more somehow, tweak whatever I was doing, I can get to where I needed to be. It just, instead of going like this, you have to take the scenic route.
Yeah. But sometimes you get a lot more vistas. See a lot more sunrise. It's one of the things that, like, part of my favorite thing about this space is that when the sun starts setting, I get a good view of the whole sky as the whole sky is changing colors. When I came here for fellowship, most folks, and you were the one that would always say this every time I'd come with you in clinic. Say, like, yeah, you could have graduated, been making this idea that in the clinic, I could have taken a contract and been working for so much more money. I came here as a fellow. All my buddies are like, dude, you're taking how much money instead of, like, an actual private practice job?
Yeah, so a lot of what you're saying, I think is really important, and it resonates a lot, hopefully, with our audience that is the people who are thinking about it, and maybe they're hitting the bumps in the road. Pretty much all of the stories we've gone through, it's been very indirect paths, ultimately. I think back, so I didn't get into medical school initially, and then I ended up going to Ross out of the country and then coming back in. And, for whatever time period that was, I can't really explain this, and part of it probably had to do with seeing my father and, and practice. I have a bunch of uncles in medicine, that kind of stuff. But I just always knew I could do what a doctor does.
Yeah.
And I can't really explain that. I just always knew I could talk to these people and help them. And I don't know why, but I always had that there. And no matter what I was hitting, I always still had that feeling like, okay, and these people scored better than me and this and the other. And like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to go to them as a doctor. Like, I would actually think that. I mean, I know it sounds obnoxious or weird, especially because they did better than me. But I would still really have that belief. And that's, sometimes I just wonder, what did other people think or feel? I know what I felt at times of failure, but it's hard to understand what other people were feeling. So, thanks for sharing that, because I think it's important for other people to see that. And we've had people on who've told us, that they've applied 3 times or more or whatever. You can't, like, fail an MCAT, but they took it, whatever, and I think it's important for people to hear this stuff. So you're in now, you've got a pretty much direct path, right? Because we all know the attrition rates are really, like, you gotta not try, right? So, like, not get out of a program that you're already in, which you can. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying, like, it's at that point, it is an effort thing, right? Because you're in. So just maintaining to graduate, right? How's it going?
Since when? Since medical school?
Since you started.
Or since I began my attending?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, med school, once again, you get into that path where it's multiple choice. So you're,
back in the race.
Yes, but like, I'm not saying I was at the top, but then where you have to always find, like, where you excel, and that's when rotations came, because I work hard. I'm a very personable person, That's my skill set. And so it was a lot easier. And once I hit the rotations in that third year, then like that's when I started feeling, oh yeah, like I can become a doctor, because the attendings would say like, hey, for example, when I didn't want to do anything with general surgery, but when I did my general surgery rotation in Hershey, like they would always like the attendings and the anesthesiologists, they would just run the medical students to the ground, So I remember there was one anesthesiologist, Dr. Packard, and the residents after like one case, because I was just like a friendly guy, don't do this. But one day, like he was getting under my nerves because that's what they do. I'm like, Dr. Packard, I can easily, as a medical student, I can do what you're doing as an anesthesiologist, right? All you have to do is this. And don't do this, but the whole OR just started laughing, right? And it made me quiet. And then after like that week, so we did 6 weeks of general surgery. After that week, he would talk to me in the surgical residence, like, do you understand that you're the only medical student that we've seen that he's ever talked to?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had a general, I'm terrible at tying knots and stuff. And there was another medical student who wanted to do general surgery, and it was a residency program. And you had to take a night, like each one night a week or something, mm-hmm. right? And the attending was that night wasn't my attending, was a different medical student. And I forget what the case was, but he's like, why aren't you, it's just like you don't want to step on people's toes. Right? And so I was like, well, the medical student who's the attendant, right? His medical student is going to scrub up being the case. I'm just going to sit in the background, with my scrub just doing like this, watching. It's like, Sundeep, why aren't you? Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, so-and-so is your medical student. He's like, no.
I don't like him.
Yeah, and he was angry. He's like, no, you're not going to gown up. You're going to gown up. I'm like, okay. And then I started going, like if I can work hard from a physical standpoint and making sure like I know what the labs or things are getting done, I'm communicating, then I can succeed.
Yeah.
So
because that's most medicine, right?
Right.
Most of medicine is not multiple choice exam.
No.
And that's just it. If you're at that point where you see like effort translating to some forms of success, and that was kind of always my thing, is that no one's going to outwork me.
That's exactly right. That I will put up to anybody, that I can do just as far as work is concerned, just as much, if not better.
Yeah. I got an award at the end of medical school. It was a plaque they made. It said, most likely to develop diarrhea after stealing patients' food. The reason why I got it is because when everybody was studying and they had their little areas or whatever it is, and they had their snacks and stuff like that too, I was always the last person to leave. And I would steal their food. And I would tell them I took it because they couldn't hang. Anyway, so that's where that came from. But the point being is that like that was my superpower, or that's what I was going to do, because maybe that'll make me whatever I need to be. So you found your path, you found your confidence in that, whether you were looking for it that direction or not. What's interesting is that, most people tell the story about this attending, and then they got through because they were so good that they spoke to them. But you kind of did it with a different angle, right? Like personality.
Yeah.
Right? Which, again, I think this is the future, right? It's going to be more about that, the ability to interact and personality. And we're all going to be questioning, what did COVID do to our kids, and why can't they talk to people, and all that.
Yeah.
So this is all going to kind of come full circle, again, diverting. But I think this original thought and concepts are going to be a really big deal, because we have AI that can search the internet, and it's been searching the net and finding what humans have said and using that to predict, the next steps. But now it's starting to just see more AI that's been put out there. So it's AI copying AI to learn from AI, so then there's going to be a market for original thought.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and that's why I started using colored markers again. I'm not kidding, man. I'm using colored markers on pieces of paper to put my ideas down, because I don't want AI touching it when I'm still thinking about it. Because otherwise, AI gets its fingers in there, and now you're thinking what the AI is thinking. You're not thinking what you're thinking. And it's one of the scariest processes. But to go back to your story, because I think my story is actually the inversion of your story, where, like, for me, tests and scores, because I grew up with 3 older brothers, I saw my dad, who told, hey, the answers are in front of you, whoop them, not literally, like, and physically, but just, like, mentally beat them down, being like, why aren't your scores high enough? And so I'm like, my scores will be high enough.
I saw what happened to that guy.
I had only one job the whole time, being the little brother. And I was like, yep, I'm going to be good in school. And so for me, I was flying. And then I finally get to rotations. And I'm like, hold on, it's not just multiple choice questions anymore. And you're starting to have to identify, and somebody either has this intangible or they don't. And the story that you said, like, yes, I completely understand your attending being like, I don't want him scrubbing in. He doesn't think. You think. And you have contextual awareness to know when it's okay to make a joke, right? You can't teach that. It's one of these things that I talk with Marissa about with Leona all the time. How do you teach a child, especially human interaction, social contextual awareness? Because no matter what you do with AI, it's not going to get it the way that an actual person with real wit will get it. Somebody who knows how to talk to somebody and know that, like, oh yeah, mentioning my dog might actually help me connect with this person who is on the verge of a near-death situation. You know, so like, I applaud you, man. It takes a lot of guts to make that kind of comment in the operating room. It does, man. And, you know, I think it's the only way to really combat the AI is to acknowledge that process of being able to integrate into a workflow, identify where you fit, where you can help, and do it without anybody making you, or just sort of integrating in. That's the skill that I think that medical school really taught, you know, because that paper, it probably also belongs to the university, right? I don't really get anything from them, but that's a tangible skill that's now in my tool belt. And I think that's where the tool belt that you guys, you guys actually have like a real tool belt to treat the human body.
Just to clarify, the paper that he's referring to is his board certificate.
Well, he's just renting it.
That he's renting.
That I'm renting. It doesn't belong to me. It's got my name on it, but it doesn't belong to me. I have to return it upon request. It felt like there's a joke in Invincible, or for the Pentagon. It's like additional parking in rear. So it's like a sign, it's like the Pentagon, and then underneath it says additional parking in rear. And that's what it felt like reading this. It's like this, look at Mary, it's got the big Gothic letters, and then it's got my name, it's got all the fine print, and then the finest print in an asterisk. This doesn't actually belong to you. You're leasing it.
And anyone who hasn't watched Invincible, you should. That's
fantastic show. Fantastic show. Talk about, like, I think part of the reason maybe why you and I both, and maybe you would also if you haven't watched it, it's a very deep reflection on the immigrant father complex.
It's so deep, and it starts off looking so superficial and clumsy that it's
But
really
then
great.
you're like, hold on, this is actually really good.
It basically looks like a bunch of knockoff superheroes.
Because that's kind of what it is.
So it's really kind of...
It's like The Boys a little bit.
Yeah.
But the thing about Invincible is I liked the second season so much that I was like, I'm not waiting for another season. And I went and bought the compendiums. And so whenever you think about these thick medical tomes, like I have the Canon of Medicine, the Qanun, but if you think about, like, I don't know, even now, Campbell's, that's what we use for urology. What's the standard internal medicine universal textbook?
Harrison,
right? And it's a huge tome like that. I've never actually read any of those kinds of tomes except for comic books. And it was Invincible. I went through 1, 2, 3. They're each like that thick. And I went through them in like a week and a half. Because what is it that makes something that makes the page just turn on its own, right? But that's how good Invincible is. So I recommend it to anybody struggling.
It's pretty deep.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So you kind of touched on earlier when we started some of the, I guess, the interest in ophthalmology, the eyes, giving people the ability to do maybe something that I wasn't, afforded the chances to. You touched on the dermatology parts of it, and then you saw some barriers there that, we were talking about fires burning, right? And some people get burned, other people, but there's also incineration. Right. And, if you're in, what was the show you were talking about where they eliminate people or whatever?
Squid Games.
Yeah. So if you're in Squid Games and you're actually dead, well, you can't really compete anymore. Right. So some things got incinerated. Yeah. And it sounds like some of those things, you took off the table, I guess is what I'm getting at. And
you can still become an astronaut.
Yeah.
You can still make it to space.
That's right. I can't know.
Like Lazarus from the dead.
It's true. I told you. So, and I know where this kind of goes, but what was your thinking, or was there some more things that kind of filtered through?
No, I think you should always, through life, you should always have a plan B and C. Always, because you never know when plan A is not going to work. So ophthalmology, didn't have a good board scores because multiple choice exam. Dermatology, very interested. Where I rotated at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia, I did a derm research there, and the attending basically said, like, you would have been better off failing your boards and then taking it again and going high rather than scoring low. Right? So plan B now out the window, right? So then I did a GI rotation. I'm like, oh, I like this, because at that time I was having like gut issues, so I was trying to always like do stuff that I was like can relate to, right? And so, and it's important. Like it's funny because there was a lecture we had. It was from a gastroenterologist, but he said that there's only 3 things people care about in the world. 3 things. You know what they are?
No.
Good food, good sex, and good bowel movements. 2 of them involve the GI system.
Did he do it just like that? Because you know what you just did.
Yeah, I know.
I know, like 2 of them involved the GI system, and he left with this. I'm like, that was brilliant.
I would have the 4th one is good skin. Like, so I was like, hey, I'll do GI. I'm like, I'll do internal medicine. Did at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and so that was Plan C, going in there. And then, but the problem is, step 3. Like, if your board scores are low, and there's some frustration because every rotation I would go to, like for example, HEMONC, I hated HEMONC. And like the guys, Dr. Argyris was this big Greek guy, one of the hematology attendants. You need to apply for fellowship in HEMONC. I'm like, he's like, we really want you. I'm like, yeah, I would apply. The problem is when you put my name up and they see my board scores, they're going to say, what kind of candidate are you bringing to the committee? Right? So that's what happened was, I interviewed. So at that time, maybe not for you, but I know it was for us. You applied during your second year for 2 years in advance. So as opposed to now, you apply your 3rd year for the next year to go into fellowship. So you had to apply. So the second year, like a whole bunch of us applied.
It's the beginning of second year too.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Because you just finished your intern year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you're starting to make a decision about maybe needing to do a specialty.
And you just never ends early. Yeah. It was crazy. I remember because then what I did, it was like I took like a nephrology elective as an intern because I wanted to then apply. And it's so painful because you don't even know, and you're an intern, you don't even know how to use a computer system. And then you're trying to like show up, like and show out, like you're meanwhile there's like 3rd years in there. It's like they fixed it.
So for us we apply the year before we graduate, so by 4s, PGY 4, because you graduate at 5 and the fellowship might be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. But at least we have, I had 4 years to think about. I've walked through everything. So, but you as an intern have to make a decision.
Yeah, and there was a quandary because the Dr. Goastani was the derm research attending at Thomas Jefferson. So this guy's really smart. He actually was a dermatologist, I think, in France. And his like CV of research is like pages and pages and pages. But because in the U.S. you have to do your residency all over again. Not only was he a derm resident, he was also a derm attending at the same time. So he calls in the middle of the second year when I'm going through the application process for GI and says, he and my dad knew each other. And so he calls my dad and says, hey, I am now the department chair at UT San Antonio for dermatology. Really recommend Sundeep to get in. Chances are he'll get in. And this is a sticking point between me and my dad. So my dad's like, because I was thinking GI, he's like, hey, Dr. Goastani said this. What do you want to do? I'm like, he's like, if it was me, I would do GI, procedures make money.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. All right. So I applied, and I interviewed at places, didn't get in. And it was like, it's embarrassing because they'll on match day, like you get matched. I think they told you like in the afternoon or something, or like that night. So the next day I was on my IC rotation and everybody's asking, where'd you match? I didn't match.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Where other people are like, yeah, I matched here.
At the time, GI was so super competitive.
Still is. I mean,
I assume it is now too.
Yes.
But, I can only speak for the time period. But yeah, it was like super. So, I mean, obviously it could be embarrassing or disappointing, but it wasn't like, I don't know. Like a lot of people, I'm sure, did not match in GI. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, you don't know that, but like, other people matched. But you have to like kind of, which is like the fire. Like you had the fire, keep going. 3rd year, now I apply again. And at that time, MD programs, MD accredited fellowships and residencies, and there was DO accredited residencies. They weren't combined. And so it was a separate application process. And so this time I applied to both DO and MD programs, GI programs in my 3rd year. But the DO programs were not in the match. So 2 weeks before the MD match, I get an offer and it totally worked out. It was in Fort Worth, Texas, UNT, University of North Texas. They were starting up a new GI fellowship program, osteopathic. And the thing is that they were going for the summer. So I didn't have to wait a year. And so I was like, so then I talked to my dad. I'm like, should I just stay in the match just in case if I don't like it? I can always pull out and like go. But there's some moral like to that.
Because then if you had signed a commitment,
exactly.
If you matched in a better place.
He's like, no. So he's like, just you got there, just get it. It's fine. So you match there, graduate residency, go there, start July 1st. And then end of August, the osteopathic accrediting committee. So I've done 30, 40 EGDs, colonoscopies, right? To this point. So 2 months in, the osteopathic accrediting board said, hey, your fellow did his residency at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, which is an allopathic institution. And he is in an osteopathic fellowship. He doesn't qualify. Yes. But there is, for example, Cleveland Clinic is at that time is an allopathic institution, but you could apply, I forget what it's called, Section 57 with the osteopathic committee. And you can get your residency certified osteopathic. So they said basically, it's end of October that you can apply for this section, whatever, but we don't meet until December. So there's no guarantee that we're going to approve University of Pittsburgh as an osteopathic accredited residency. And then on top of that, I had passed my boards, the ABIM. Well, they don't accept that. You have to take the osteopathic internal medicine boards, which I already missed so I have to take it the next year. Yeah. So at the end of August, I said, I told my program director, listen, I can apply, but what happens in December if they say no? 6 months, you could have had a fellow here in September. Mm-hmm. And so, for the good of the program, number one. Number two, I don't want to be my third year and then the osteopathic committee says, hey, there's one other thing you need to do. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're not going to graduate you. I'm like, I don't want to be put on that stress. So I withdrew from the fellowship. To make, if you want to, when it rains, it pours. So I'm in Fort Worth. Dr. Goastani, the chairman of dermatology at UT San Antonio. So I call him up. I said, hey, this is what happened. Would you accept me into dermatology? And he says, Sundeep, I would. The problem is, 4 weeks ago, I left that position, and now I'm in private practice. So you can imagine, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, exactly.
It's just everywhere you're turning. It's like a boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up becoming a hospitalist. So now I'm now what am I going to do? I have student loans I have to pay back. I don't have a job. Yeah. And so I end up going back to Erie. So this was end of August. So I have to interview for jobs. Don't have any money that pay my rent. And then I end up getting in Erie, Pennsylvania, back in Erie, one of the big hospitals, Hammett, which is now UPMC Hammett, hired me as a hospitalist in December. So yeah. And then I did apply for GI allopathic the next year, but then I didn't get any interviews.
At that point, it's already what happened here? He was in a program, then he left. Yeah. There's flags.
Yeah, exactly.
Flags of confusion there's never going to be an explanation from that point, before you get an interview. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, that's wow.
But it's one of those situations. So you said that because they offered you the job, so you signed the contract and then pulled out of the allopathic match.
Yeah. So I never was in them. I never matched.
And that was out of an honor code.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
but there was, and this is one of those things where it's just they talk about in golf, when you make that kind of honorable decision, and when it backfires in this sort of situation.
What does it teach you?
Yeah. Right? Those types of, and and residency is filled with those kinds of experiences in terms of patient care. You guys would have a lot of ideas and experiences, but it's but to have it happen on this level of career scale, of if you had done the questionable thing and looked out for yourself and just said, yeah, I'm going to stay in the match and sign this, right? And then be like, oh, I matched, I'm going to ditch you.
Yeah.
Right? But they didn't come, they're the ones who burned you. Right? So it's just one of these really painful realities that I'm sorry, man. And but you made it. And that's freaking awesome. Yeah. I bet you learned a ton from it too.
You worked as a hospitalist for a long time.
Yeah, 16 years. And then, so I did 16 years. Yeah, so I'm 46 right now. You imagine? I was just looking at when you graduated. When you went into medical school, I think I had finished residency. 2009, that's when I graduated residency.
2009, you graduated. 2009, I was
you were in
junior high school. Wow.
So I will just tell you, you just mentioned junior high school. So I will tell this to your viewers that no matter what you choose, but especially in medicine, you have to be humble. Very humbled. And I say this because last year, as a first year, we had a patient who was hyperkalemic, and the senior general surgery resident didn't know who I was, just I'm a first year nephrology fellow, right? Says that you're not taking hyperkalemia seriously. So I did the math. When I became an attending in 2009, she was in 8th grade. If you include like when I was a third year medical student managing hyperkalemia, she was in 3rd grade. But I kept calm. I didn't say like, hey, if I was younger, I would have said like, do you know who you're talking to right now? I kept calm, like, don't worry, we got this. But you got to stay humble. But I tell that story. This is the same reaction. Everybody laughs because now the person looks ridiculous.
Man.
And I would say, like, you don't know on the other side, like at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, a lot of the residents were international medical graduates. And you talked about the fire. These people, surgeons, already cardiologists, neurology, critical care. We had GI from Lebanon. And like, they were attendings. Sometimes they knew more than the attendings, right? And so you have to be humble because you don't know on the other side. These guys had the drive. I can't imagine if you told me I had to do residency. Could you do residency all over again?
I remember I was doing I think it was an OB rotation, and there was a guy who was redoing his family practice residency. Well, he was doing a family practice residency. And then I heard this like call overhead, whatever. This guy, it was a Russian guy who had apparently done more liver transplants than like anyone in the US. I never calling him to the OR for like, I mean, like, could you imagine this guy who is a liver transplant surgeon? It's like, wow, he was in his first year redoing. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's something when you go through life, you have to always realize, like, there's always someone who's had it worse than you that has thrived. So it should also light the fire in you, like, hey, I can make it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
You think your path was rough?
Yeah.
Some people had to hit a complete rewind.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So 16 years, right? This isn't going to be a uniform thing. 16 years. You go in the first couple of years, there has to be some degree of like, oh, is this the right place, or did it feel right?
Yeah. I mean, so it was nice because in Erie, in a small town, 120,000 people. Erie County is like 250. So a lot of people in the hospitals. There's 3 main hospitals. Emmett, St. Vincent, they're like, I don't know, 400 bed hospitals or something. And then a smaller hospital. So everybody knew my father. So I got along with part of the reason because my father was the vice chairman of the Pennsylvania State Medical Board. So everybody knew my dad. So it was easy for me actually at the hospital because everybody.
This can go the other way. People could hate you for this.
Yeah, no,
right?
You're right, because I was in the doctor's lounge at Emmett, and everybody's, like I said, they're always friendly with me because actually, when I was a student, I rotated with a lot of the attendings, and now an attending along with them. But there was one pediatrician, very young pediatrician, said like, yeah, your dad one day came up and said, hey, this is how he introduced himself. I'm Dr. Ram, vice chairman of the state medical board. And you could tell he was peeved. So that was like, it worked, like how it worked against me. We've been friends with these old time docs, and you grew up. Because, my parents would throw parties. They would throw parties for, 25, 30 years. You've known it was very easy. But then I ended up moving so I spent 2009, and then 2011, I moved to Gulfport, Mississippi, because one of my co-residents in residency, he was a year younger than me. He got a job there, and he's like, so part of the thing was loan repayment. So now you have to start thinking about loan repayment, right? And so the incentive was way, way better going to Mississippi. So I was getting, I think they said, in Erie, it was like 18 grand over 5 years. Like 18 grand, like a year for 5 years. Right. Okay. Whereas Mississippi, 100 grand up front.
Wow.
3-year commitment. Yeah. If you leave early, you got to pay back with interest. So I was like, see it. Because now you just have to start deleting what your priorities are.
Yeah.
Right. And so the other thing too, a little side, talking about father, the nurses would say, oh, you're Dr. Ram. Because your father was asking me like, hey, are you single? Because I have a son who's... So I had to get away from that situation.
Oh my God.
Every day this happened. Yeah, so I was like, I have to get out of the situation and I can pay off my loans.
Yeah.
So I went So I went to Gulfport and I was a hospitalist there, got along with everybody there. And then within a year, paid off my student loans. And if there's anything, the best advice is pay off your loans as soon as you can. Because that's a huge, monkey off your back.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden making lots of money is not the drive. Now it's quality. You talked about this generation of quality of life. Now quality of life is a thing. So I ended up leaving. So then once I paid off my loans, I was like a year and a half into it, and I saved up my money. I said, I don't want to do nights anymore. And so they're like, no, you have to do nights. I'm like, no, I don't. My parents had bought a house in Orlando in 2011, like with the crash. So I moved. So this is 2013. I moved. I got a job in Orlando where I didn't have to do nights. Later, as I saved that money, I paid off my loans. I just paid back like half of what they had given me, plus interest.
Yeah.
And then, I was there after a while. I spent a year there, and one of my colleagues in Orlando was saying, at that time I was single. She's like, her name was Jillian. It's like, well, why are you employed? Why are you employed? I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, you're single, you should do locums. You can travel, you can make much more money than you're making. And you don't have to deal with all the bureaucratic, being an academic, sort of the hospital politics that happens. And so I was like, a little bit on edge. I was like, at that time I was getting my MBA, and I'm like, okay, so I was there for a year.
What made you choose to get that?
Yeah, when I was in Erie as a hospitalist, actually the CMO, who was a vascular surgeon, retired. I asked him, like, how'd you get in this position? He's like, the best thing you do is you need to have a second degree. And he said, like, I would do it now, because at that time I was in my 30s. He was in his like 50s or 60s when he got his second degree, if you want to move up. So I was like, I was thinking like, MBA, I started getting burned out. Yeah, I could do like a master's of science or an MPH, but where does that get me? It's like with MBA, maybe I can just quit medicine and do something in finance. So like, let me do the MBA, and I learned something, and that's something you have to realize. Hobbies is like IT. So I was installing medical billing software when I was in high school, and I was doing tech support for my dad. And then at University of Pittsburgh in residency, I actually set up the initial with Cerner, like online documentation, because we were still doing on paper and stuff. So I started when I went into became a hospitalist. Inefficiencies are my biggest pet peeve, which can be solved by tech and now AI. The thing is, people wouldn't listen to you. Didn't matter how much experience I had, because if someone who had an extra degree and was out for a year, but you have 10 years of experience, they're going to look at that extra degree. So the MBA was just solely just to put more letters behind my name to give me credence.
Right.
So I ended up locums. I was like, oh, this is great, because now I can work around my schedule, exams, doing locums. I wouldn't do shifts when I had like project or, holidays or whatever. Finished my MBA. And then I was like, with locums, I'm making more money, like 50% more. I'm seeing 2/3 less patients. I don't have to do nights, and I don't have to do holidays.
Vacations. Vacations are baked in. You just don't work.
Right. And the bonus structure, right? You guys have a bonus structure like in hospital medicine. You have a bonus structure as employees. So one of it is like patient satisfaction, depending on the institution, length of stay. Well, the problem is if you have a person who wants narcotics, and that you shouldn't be giving it to them, then what's your patient satisfaction score going to be?
Right.
So we actually had a hospitalist in Orlando. I had heard through the grapevine that he would go to every patient and say, like, okay, what do I need to do for you to give me a 5 out of 5 on the survey?
This is a huge thing. Emergency medicine, it's like one of the biggest when the Press-Ganey scores. And they apply for jobs with their Press-Ganey scores, at least before. And there were training programs, and people, I remember there was a guy who scored, had really bad reviews and then went to training, came back and said things like, I have more meds than you have pain. Right?
Yeah.
And obviously we've shifted on that the other way now. But, you're set up to. But,
and this goes like, there's an ethical standard, but this kind of ties in back to the multiple choice exam, that you had people who understood how to game the system to get ahead. And that's what you're doing with the patients. And I can tell you, when I was in Orlando, I remember clearly our hospitalist director was a critical care physician, and we had to have our quarterly meetings, and he sat me down. My scores, like, for communication were like, below average, right? This is the best, below average. And we're talking like bonus of like 10 grand. This isn't like chump change. And so I'm not getting the bonus. I'm like, well, what do I need to do? Like, one of the things was like, wasn't talking to consultants. I'm like, how do they know I'm not talking to consultants? I know I'm talking to consultants. And the last page. And so one of the sample size was 7 in a quarter, 3 months, 17 surveys filled. I see 20 to 25 patients a day, only 17. So on the back of the page, it says like positive comments, negative comments about Dr. Ram. Positive comments, all of them were, Dr. Ram communicates so good. Because I asked him, like, what, before he turned to that page, because he hadn't read my report. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, well, just tell the patient you're going to talk to them and blah, blah, blah. Then he turns the page and he's reading all these pages. I'm like, okay, Dr. So-and-so, what am I supposed to do? Oh, and under negative comments, nothing. 0.
Wow.
And it was all about how I'm a great communicator. And I'm like, okay, now what do you want me to do? And he literally, this is what he did in the meeting, he goes, but that cost me money, right? That cost money. Yeah. So, I ended up doing Locum because now my rate, I baked in my bonus into the rate. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what my patient satisfaction scores. Length of stay was other thing. Like if cardiology, or we had this thing in general surgery, you had a cholecystitis, and they would put have IR put a cholecystostomy tube, have them come back in a week. So but we couldn't discharge them because they're in pain.
Do you want a liquid death, doctor?
No, I'm good.
It's sparkling water. It just tastes like Dr. Pepper.
Sure.
Yeah.
It looks like beer, but
it's not.
Exactly.
It's a joke drink, but it's
thank you.
It's like Dr. Pepper, like super light.
No, it's just good.
There's nothing in it. It's just water with stuff.
So we would go in the length of stay, like, and then they would come back and it would be a hit on you because they were readmitted. And so you're like, well, come on. When I was in residency, you came with cholecystitis, you did a cholecystectomy. Get it out.
Yeah.
Bright lights, cold steel.
Yeah.
And they're going,
bright lights, cold steel.
So you're not in control of your pay based on other people, and it just wasn't fair. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to game the system. I'll become locums. I'll bake in my whatever I want to make. This is going to be my rate. So instead of working 14 to 15 days a month as a hospitalist, I'm now working 10 to 12. And I'm seeing less patients.
And you're choosing when you want to do it.
Yeah.
Your quality of life.
And then in my off time, I had done part of my, the MBA. We had to do some projects, and I did a lot of this efficiency stuff. And so that's when I was looking into doing the healthcare IT startup.
Yeah.
So I ventured into that because you should always, like I said, have a plan B or C, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to be a hospitalist for another 25 years. It just, you were getting burned out. So in that extra degree, the MBA helped because it's this guy's the real deal. So part of the healthcare startup I was with, the team, was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, the chief technology officer. He's the one that invented OnStar. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We had a chief innovation officer. He does a lot with AI. And so even though he was based in Orlando, he was teaching classes at Villanova on AI and stuff. And he's published, papers and stuff like that about AI.
So what was the goal of the company?
Yeah. So the founder, he had known people who had gotten burned by the medical system, meaning it's, the medical system is so disjointed. And actually, one of his friends, died from cancer because somebody missed it. It was in the scan because people missed it. They didn't read the report, blah, 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 found it too late. Now it's too late for chemo and ended up dying. So he's like, I don't understand in Silicon Valley, if there's a problem, we will, or if there's inefficiencies, we develop a program or do something and we can streamline it right then and there. Why can't we do that in medicine? So he did, it was kind of a coordinated or multifaceted project that he did.
Good.
And so he had a EMR, and the EMR also included radiology software. It included back-end software, if you wanted to, for example, call to get an appointment. So we had an AI program where you could just go on the computer and book your appointment. And then you would, the doctor can leave, let's say 2 or 3 slots at the end of the day for add-ons. And so these offices were able to go from being for 3, 4 telephone lines down to 1. So you see improving the cost. Excuse me. And so he had I don't know if you know, EHR programs are like tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Once you get into the university, millions of dollars. And so there was a famous cardiology group in Philadelphia. They did had their own servers. I don't even know how much they paid for their EHR, but they had everything, and they got so fed up with it. They said, we'd rather take the deduction in Medicare funds
of not having
an EHR and just see 2 or 3 more patients to make up the difference. Yeah. So we were going to say, hey, we were offering our EHR to providers for free, and every transaction you made, we take a cut of that. So that was one. There was a second component where we had essentially it was called health sharing, which is, I don't know if you've heard Liberty Health Share, or there's other ones, but it's basically insurance. But basically what happens is you're in a group cooperative and everybody pays into a pot. Whoever needs some medicals, it gets taken out of a pot. Yeah. So there's no risk stratification. Oh, you're high risk, you paid this much. I'm low risk, I paid lower premium. And so we had this all set up. Our CEO happened to be part of in the government of Florida. And so he knew a lot of small businesses who couldn't afford to give their folks insurance, that we can market this health share cheap. They get coverage. People aren't missing work, being sick. Yeah. And so there was that component. And then we had the AI component, the research component, because now you have all these people in your system. And we were working with the UCF to now you can start using AI, start analyzing data. And the ultimate goal was, let's say you have 100 employees, and I'm just making this up. Let's say you have to do a stress test on 20 people to find out the 5 people who are going to get the bypass. And so your goal is, if you do lifestyle changes or whatever, maybe they can avoid the bypass, save the system money. And so with the AI, instead of saying you have to do a stress test on 20 people for the 5 people, maybe you only had to do it for 7 people. And you could focus, and then, hey, these are the 7 people at risk. Let's dedicate our medical resources to them. Counseling, lifestyle changes, nutritionist, exercise program, blah, 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 blah. And then, so he had this whole thing set up. But it was built on, he had 2 choices. He was told by another guy who was doing this at a high level, with Walmart and Walgreens and stuff. He said that guy said he probably should raise $5 to $6 million. But, he didn't want to do what we were doing at the local level, because he said I'm getting paid this much money, hundreds of millions of dollars with Walmart. What you're doing is chump change, basically. Mm. So he's you guys do it, but this is what I recommend. But he decided that instead of getting investor money, that he would pay for by the self-insurance. People come in the pot, and then you self-fund and all that, which is great. Everything worked out. This was a 2-3 year in the making, hard work. And then COVID. And what happens? Now everybody doesn't have a job. So who needs insurance, right? Yeah. So if people aren't paying to get insurance, then you don't have funds to do that. So I was the chief medical officer because they needed a physician there. Yeah, so so that was the first iteration. And so the COVID hit, so it kind of basically just petered out. But then his brother actually is a big restaurateur in Atlanta. And one of the things, I don't remember, at the beginning of COVID, nobody knew where to get tests.
Yeah.
Right? And what do you do? So that was in the restaurants in Atlanta didn't know what to do, because if your waiters or waitresses are sick, can you open the restaurant? Your cooks are sick, Yeah. So we set up a mobile lab, and it went, it started going. We did this a New Year's Eve party where we had this QR, almost if you ever see Clear, but you have this QR code. And you had to get lab work the day before, and then you would just scan the QR code at the door. Okay, you don't have COVID, you're allowed into the party. The New Year's party went totally great. But then when we started to do this on a bigger scale, the problem is, where do you get the test?
Right.
If you don't have the supply, because everyone now is getting right. So we didn't have enough. We didn't have the supply. And then one of the things you'll learn in medicine, there will always be people who will try to take your idea. And so one of the things was vaccines that we were going to give. But what happened was these people who were part of it that he brought in stole his idea, went to the Georgia government, said, hey, we'll give your prisoners COVID vaccines. This is how much it's going to cost. So they got the contract. We didn't. Yeah, exactly. So there's always people in the periphery that you always have to be wary about, trying to pick off your ideas. So yeah. So anyway, that second iteration went by the wayside, and then he ended up doing a third iteration, but then I kind of backed out because at that time I had was I had done less shifts because I was devoted. I didn't make any money. Like the whole point was I would get stock in the company. We would grow this thing, and then eventually sell it. My cut would have been, who knows, $5-10 million. But because all this happened, I never got any money. So I was like, after the third iteration, I'm like, well, I like wasn't working as much. My salary's reduced. I got to like make up for this now. How much time can I spend 3 years like doing this?
And they just putting a clock on things, because after a certain point, it's like, did you feel, because to go back to the original start of this discussion, one of those first drives, he's talking about the ladies and being able to take off the bandage and, oh my God, they can see. Were you missing any of that aspect of like life, job, and purpose?
Well, that was the thing about the healthcare IT stuff. Like we truly had a genuine idea of really helping people out. Getting people access, like coverage with the health sharing, getting people to actually get access to the providers. And it's not just like, just treating them, using that data, plugging it into AI to now say, okay, let's really dedicate, instead of essentially guessing, let's really dedicate our resources to people who actually need it. That's a whole fundamental change in the U.S. healthcare system.
Yep.
Imagine doing that.
That's one of the. There was a buddy of mine. He graduated a couple years before me. He's working in a company now. I think that one of his startups is doing that. Is that type of medical scheduling efficiency? I mean, just in the last few weeks alone, we scheduled an appointment for my son on the same day that my daughter has an appointment. She goes to the appointment. It's like a specialty follow up, but we kind of just walked in. She said, "Oh, you're not having any more problems, huh?" And she said, "No." She goes, "Okay, well, call me when you need me." And I was like, did we really need to drive all over the east side for this? And it's one of those things, and I'm not mad about that. And that's the other thing, is that because I see my own fair share of those kinds of appointments, but it's one of the questions that you start asking yourself, because now I'm pivoting my entire model of practice with this change, and it's like I'm spending so much time in clinic. It's like, how many of these clinic patients would have been real great to just, send a certified letter with my signature on it that your PSA looks great. I'll see you whenever.
There's a lot of counter regulation, right? And with this, ever since COVID, there was all this telephone video, and now it's like, oh, we can't do that. And all it takes is a couple of people to scam the system. And now the insurance companies want to make sure you actually have visits, which ends up costing them more because they're paying for the facility as well as being roomed and all this other stuff. So it costs them more than saying a phone visit, but they're willing to take that rather than get scammed by maybe invisible phone visits that never happened, or videos or certified letters that someone was just
sending off.
And because this is all billable services, right? So there's more where your life goes, and we can get into it or not. I mean, I think we're hitting a lot of the core things. I do want to ask you one thing. You can kind of go with your gut reaction and then explain as much as you want. Are you a lucky person?
Oh, of course. Just the fact of living in America, right? Because you don't really understand until you go to some other country, and then you see like, I have a home, I have education, I have food for money. I have money for food. I know when I go to India, like you see, you don't have like a backup system, Medicaid, the CHIP program. You either work or you beg. Those are the only two options, right? And I'm lucky that and you don't know, like if someone has a vendetta, they can call the police. The police come to. I know this because it actually happened. Like somebody had a vendetta against one of my cousins, and the police came and was gonna like beat the crap out of them in India. But my father like happens to know like the chief of police. That's what I was saying. That's why people move from every country. They want to move here.
Okay, so you're lucky to be here. Okay, what about? Well, you don't have to compare yourself, but I mean, let's say generally people here, but like you yourself, do you think you're a lucky person or fortunate?
I would say fortunate. Because I would say I was unlucky to get GI.
Just from hearing your stories right now, I can give you 10 instances where you could have gone straight into the world's against me. I'm unlucky. What's the point? This, that, and the other, But there's something to be said about how you respond to those things, how you view those things, right? And seeing the overarching, I have all these opportunities to weave and try different things versus 9/11, clearly the world's against me, COVID, whatever, the whole GI, derm, you name it, right? I mean, and I don't know you as well as other people do, right? But just from this, I can tell you there's a lot of people who could have taken any one of those.
Yeah. And I think there's, I forget who said this, but I remember reading like, there's only two types of people in this world. People who cry about it or people who will do something about it. And if you cry about it, it doesn't matter how much you cry, it's not going to get done. So why? And I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I try to use the least amount of energy I can. So crying about it takes too much, and whining about it takes too much energy. And then I don't get accomplished what I needed to get accomplished anyway. I still have to do it. So like, forget that step and just go straight to doing it. There was a nephrologist actually, like when I was in residency, Dr. Levinson from Harvard, and he was telling me when he was in residency, he's like, he was really bad. Like he just got 1 million consults. He's overnight and he's just like whining, like, oh, I gotta do. And he's like, I just realized, like, just do it because the day's gonna end. Like whining is just delaying you from getting done.
Yeah.
And so
I think that was one of the key lessons I picked up in residency from a guy named George Portuondo. He was a general surgeon. This is one of the things about being at Baylor is that all the general surgery residents were insanely smart because it's the Bakey department of surgery, right? So everybody's like, whoa. So they were like, these is like internationally, like ridiculously. So I'm an intern. I'm just there, doing my general surgery rotations because I have to be there to get to urology. And these guys are all like ridiculously smart. He always said this every time we were on a rotation together. He goes, whatever the thing is, just do the thing. Because that's how he would explain it to medical students. Because we had these medical students, he's like, what's the thing that you have to do here? Okay, just do the thing. Right? Just do the thing. It's a weird phone call to a social worker. Yeah, just do it. Just do it. And then if they answer, great. If they don't, the only thing worse than it being a tough conversation is needing to have had the conversation. The moment comes, they ask you if you've done it, and then you haven't done it. Why didn't you do it? Just do the thing, right? And so that became like my motto through all of intern year. It was like, just do the thing. Yeah. Right. And
I remember I was a third year resident. This is in Yukon, and I had an intern come in, and this is at the time of paper charts. There had been a patient who had been there for 2 years-ish, something like that. And now they're finally getting discharged to the nursing home. So the single worst thing you could have to do is the discharge summary, right? I tell the guy who's my intern, I'm not doing this thing, right? I was like, guess what you get to do? This is his first week. First, he has to hold on to medical records to get the other 4 books that they were storing down there because, this was the one he was currently on, but it's not it, right? You got to get the story from the beginning and all the antibiotics or whatever and go over it. And, I leave him there because this is in the ICU. I don't know where this patient is. I leave him there. I'm like, whatever. I'm going around and I come back and this guy's got his books up and his legs up. He's kicked back. He's having a great time. He's dictating on the phone and, he's flipping through the pages and he's like, it looks like he's having a great time. His name is Sanjeev as well. Everybody hates doing these things. This is like the single worst thing that you could do. Why are you like fully embracing it and enjoying this? And he looks at me and with a straight face, he said, if I hate it, I'm just going to hate it every time and hate it the rest of my life. I might as well just go. This is the same guy who's now like constantly sending pictures. He's like in Africa saving kids. I mean, anyway, so you know who he was, right? Yeah. I didn't get it at the time who he was going to be. He ended up becoming like a heart failure specialist and treating like little kids. He's that guy, right? Ultimately. But that was his response. That's the way he responded. That's the way he embraced it. And he was like that the whole time. He'd be getting slammed overwhelmed, still smiling, going around. And he always had that edge of like, no matter what it is, so many people have it so much worse. Yeah. He truly carried it every day. It's easy to say it, but he truly carried it every day. I do want to get into your, you've kind of set it up where things are going, but this choice of then after these things obviously aren't panning out and then you're now a nephrology fellow. Yeah. Right. So you made that decision.
So yeah, once I paid off the student loans, like I said, things started to change. Quality of life was more of an importance now. Mm-hmm. And so as a hospitalist, you get burned out for the various reasons, like I said. And I started looking. So now you start thinking about the future. And you say, okay, at that time, 44 years old or whatever. I'm not even halfway through my career. Like I'm going to work till 65, 70. Can I be a hospitalist for the next 25, 30 years? And the answer is no. Mm-hmm. I've done it for, at that time, 15 years and I hate it. Yeah, that's why I don't yell. Whenever I get a consult from the hospitals, I don't yell back at them because I know exactly where they're coming from. Yeah, I feel bad for them because I know what it's like as a hospitalist, like trying to get a consult and then you get yelled back. So my buddy, Jay Tucker, he's a transplant nephrologist at Ohio State. We were co-residents together. He's from Nepal. We were co-residents together at Pitt, and then he became a hospitalist I don't know, maybe for like 10 years or something. And then he did nephrology at University of Rochester, then did transplant nephrology at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And then he would, because I'm living in Orlando, and so he and his wife and his kids would visit me every year around Christmas time. We go to the beach, we go everywhere, And he just one time he visited, the last time he like visited, he's like, "Hey, like you look beat." I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, he's like, do nephrology. It's like, you gotta like just do something. It was interesting because when I was in medical school, the cardiologist, good friends with my father, Dr. Sharma, founded the cardiology group in Erie at Hammond Hospital. And when I rotated under him, and he told me at that time in medical school, he's like, whatever you do, become a specialist. He's like, trust me. He's like, you'll make money. It doesn't matter what specialty you can go to, you're going to make money. Doesn't matter. But you don't have to deal with the BS. And that's what in pediatrics, family medicine, internal medicine, hospital medicine, you deal with a lot of BS. You think you deal with BS in academic center urology, multiply it by literally 1 million, and that's what like a hospitalist is.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, I'm like thinking like, what did Dr. Sharma say? And now my buddy's saying like he's enjoying his life. He's like, I make less money as a transplant nephrologist than I did as a hospitalist, but like my stress levels are way down. And that's what I'm saying. Like after you pay off your student loans, you just want to like be on cruise control. And I knew I was going to do that as a hospitalist. And I was like, well, should I apply to GI again? I'm like, that train has left. So
he's like, 3 days.
Yeah.
What was it again?
He's like, apply to nephrology, so I applied to nephrology. And I wasn't going to apply here, but he knows Dr. Peruggiuli. They were med school student friends. And so he's like, hey, apply to UW. And I wanted to do interventional nephrology at the time. He's like, they have an interventional nephrology program. My buddy's there.
And your dad's like, procedures.
Exactly, procedures. And so I matched here. And then everyone always asks, like, oh, are you're 46. Are you, like, you're happy you're doing this, like, midway through your career? Yeah, not to have to do no HMPs or discharge summaries or pain medicines or anxiety medicines. Like, you don't have to do any of that. I can just focus on one thing. So it was, and then you kind of said, feeling the fire to help cure the ophthalmologist when they unwrap with transplant. Hey, you have a new kidney. You don't need dialysis. That's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
They ring the bell after 5 years or something down there
that's amazing.
In the clinic.
But and this is kind of a good point in that there was a point where I made fun of my father, who was a pulmonologist, and you've seen all these people with like lung problems. A lot of it was like at that time, like smoking and a COPD. And I said to him one day, none of your patients ever get better. They just progressively get worse. Their lungs get worse. There's very few people who get a transplant. And this was a long time ago, so it was even less. And of course, he ended up saying to me at some point, like, but your patients, you have kidney patients, right? But transplant is that area, right? Where, you see these people come, they're better. Maybe a questionable amount of time, but at least there is this turnaround where they actually turn around and get better. So you get that unwrapping, effect, at least to some degree. And you generally, I don't know, it keeps changing, but there was a time where you were dealing with transplants, you were dealing with a younger population. And, you see some of those great positive made for TV miracles that can, keep you going for a while, less fire to burn you out.
Yeah, because the other side of the fire equation is the water. Because sometimes when you're overheating and you're burning out, you need to find something that just helps you turn your brain off, right? So just rest the mind and start relaxing and floating instead of constantly being in this churning state, right? And I think we were talking about the experience of the fellowship, and that's the other thing about being in that type of engine that can keep going, like how long can you really run it? And why would I never do residency again? Well, because I just remember this distinct moment when I realized, I was like, hey, I'm the junior. I'm just the engine of this team. They need numbers. They need things. They need the things to work. I'm just churning this engine of, inpatient urologic service.
Doing the thing.
Yeah, doing the thing. This guy had a prostatectomy. He's going to go home tomorrow. He doesn't go home tomorrow. He's going to go the day after. And at the same time, you're doing that for 16 other people, right? But for you guys, it's like 70 hospitalists. You guys' lists are really long. But that's how I always knew that, like, for me, even just doing a post-operative, urologic ward with a couple of consults or a handful of consults, the list sometimes, whenever the list would balloon, you knew it was a bad day. If the list was like light, it was a good day. But that was like for residency in a very specific urologic thing. You were telling me that was your existence for 16 years for all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
I'm like, my God.
And people are saying, like, hey, towards the end of my career, I was like working 10 days a month because I'm flying every month, right? So I'm top tier on United Airlines frequent flyer, get upgrade. Top tier on the with not Enterprise. Was it Enterprise? I can't remember. Like, so you get the upgrades. Nice. Top tier with IHG because I always stayed at the Holiday Inn.
There you
and
go.
So you get all these upgrades at home. I worked 10 days at home. I like gardening and landscaping. My backyard faced east. So once, two, sometimes 3 times a day, see SpaceX rockets,
That's wild.
Right? Yeah.
That's wild.
Drink a margarita. The beach is an hour. That was my life.
But you're an astronaut sometimes. Take it off in
Every
there.
single time you're like, I'm on the next one.
But for your viewers, you have to love what you're doing. Right? I had that was my making good money. I wasn't like, I knew I couldn't do that. I have to want to get into a place where you have to love what you do. And, you talk about fire. This also extends outside of medicine. So, one of the things I started after I paid off my loans, I started saving up money. So philanthropy is a big one of my healthcare, IT, philanthropy, improving processes. So I had more than enough money where I donate 10% of my salary every year to charity. And so one year, actually, you can actually Google this. Like I paid off in Orange County where I was at. I paid off the remaining student meal, debt.
Yeah.
And then in Seminole County, which was like just north of me, I told them like whatever remaining money I had from that 10% would go to the bottom 3 schools, like socioeconomic status schools, to pay off their student meal debt.
Yeah.
So, and then now I just committed just this past fall, like a $50,000 to Penn. I was an EMT at Penn State, so they are making a new like an EMT room, call room, and so it's like $10,000 a year for 5 years. But that's that fire you want to help. I'm helping people through medicine, but I'm also helping people. You don't have to do it in medicine. You can help people in other ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
and I think that's probably the best thing about this is that we've taken these deep dives into what you did for your job, but then, like you said, this bigger picture view. You wanted to be an astronaut. You wanted to help people. You got to be involved watching the space. You were there. You're seeing it,
exactly.
Right? And then you're still helping people in a way that was so much deeper. And that's, I think, again, the number of tunnels that you've been through, the number of transitions into the next phase, into the next phase, into the next, I have to transition from this because it didn't work out. I mean, whatever you were seeing with those lenses in your youth about wanting to be an astronaut and wanting to help people, like you still have that lens, right? And that's really refreshing. And like the one thing about this job and this race and, churning is I feel like I always fear that like I've lost that lens, that original. And I think to tie this all back together, the reason why behind that it says John Splitoff, I printed 2 copies of my personal statement from when I was a medical student. And my biggest dream was to be in a room like this, being a urologist with my residents and my patients and things like that. And it's still, I have to pinch myself. Like, how did this happen? But you can still, and it's because of that lens that you had and you began. Were you targeting something worth it? Right? And it looks like you were, ma'am. And it looks like you still got your eyes on the prize.
I get the feeling you're going to be the first honor flight that's on a space shuttle.
Yeah.